welcome back to the online class for class 8 English 1. Today we will be doing the last class by Alphonse Daudet. If you recall, in the previous class we had gone through the story of Gogol's first day, and today it is quite the opposite, the last class. And this story was written by Alphonse Daudet, who was a French writer. And just to give you an extra information, in fact, he started as a teacher, but later on, because of his own personal interest, he moved to journalism and also wrote several works of literature, and this is one of them. Before I go to the story itself, let me tell you in brief about the background of this story, the last class. So this story is set in the French province of Alsace. Okay, so we all know the country of France, and the province of Alsace, it is a kind of a district to help us to understand it in terms of how we call it in India. It is 1870, and the Franco-Prussian War fought between the French and the Prussians, that is the Germans, had just ended with an immense German victory. The state schools in France have been taken over by the German authorities, and German has become the medium of instruction. So what happened was, during this war that was fought from 1870 to 1872, a war was fought between France and Prussia. Now Prussia comprised of many countries, because the country of Prussia is no longer there now. So just to give you an idea how many countries combined to form the country of Prussia at that time: Belgium, the Czech Republic, Denmark, Germany, Lithuania, Netherlands, Poland, Russia and Switzerland were part of what was Prussia then. And it was led by their leader was called Otto von Bismarck, and he led this war, and they defeated the French. And so, since they have defeated, they occupied this province of Alsace, and they imposed their language, that is German, on the people of Alsace. So this is the background of the story. But the French people do not accept the German rule and continue to see themselves as French, because as we all know that our language is our identity, and to impose someone else's language on us is trying to steal our identity from us. So the French people also were not ready to accept it. In this story, the last class, a young boy named Franz is on his way to school. He has no idea that his life is about to be changed forever. Okay? So, as we go through the story, I would like you to take note of the French terms and words. French is a very beautiful language, and who knows, one day some of you may end up learning French, because you never know where you might end up, and you might have to learn it as a hobby or even as part of your career. Anyway, so note these words, the French words, as you go through it, and try to get the meaning so that you understand it better. And of course, the textbook also has several words for vocabulary provided on the left, and I want you to go through that for your better understanding. So page 39, we shall start the story, and we will begin. So, the background, now we come to the characters. So here the story begins with a young boy called Franz. Franz is a schoolboy. He is going to school. And the story is told by Franz himself. So it's written in the first person. Para 1. I was very late for school that morning, and I was afraid of being scolded, especially as Monsieur Amal had told us that he should examine us on participles, and I did not know the first thing about them. For a moment, I thought of staying away from school. It was such a warm, lovely day. I could hear blackbirds whistling, and in the field behind the sawmill, the Prussians going through their drill. So in this first para, Franz is telling about himself. As he's on his way to school, he remembers what his teacher, what is the name of his teacher? If you look at para 1, his name is Monsieur Amal. The H is silent. Monsieur here stands for Mr. in English. So, it seems that Monsieur Amal had given them homework that is on participles. So, Franz remembered, but by then, actually, it was too late because he had not studied it and he didn't know the first thing about them. I'm sure some of you will understand what Franz is saying. So, he thought, instead of going to school, I better stay away from school today. The birds are whistling, the skies are blue, the Prussians are going through their drill. So how about I bunk school today? Does it do it? Let's see. Para 2. As I passed the mayor's office, I saw that there were people gathered about the little board on which notices were posted. For 2 years, all our bad news had come from that board. Battles lost, conscriptions, and I thought without stopping, what can it be now? So as Franz was going on his way to school, he noticed that there were several people assembled in front of the mayor's office. So to help you to understand what is a mayor, it's somebody who is the head of governance in that province is known as a mayor. And in comparison, we have in our district of Kachar, we have the district commissioner. So something like that. So when he crossed by the mayor's office, he saw that many people were assembled there. And they seemed to be looking at the notice board. So it seems that that notice board had been the source of all the news, good news as well as the bad news. So Franz thought, he didn't stop, but he thought to himself, what news was there on the notice board? Para 3. Then, as I ran across the square, Walter the blacksmith, who stood there reading the board, called out to me, "Don't hurry so, my boy. You'll get to your school soon enough." So here another character, Walter. Who is Walter? He's the blacksmith. And he saw Franz passing by him and he told him, "Don't hurry." Now remember, Franz was late already, but he told Franz, "Don't hurry, you'll be there in time." And Franz thought, as he says in para 4, I thought he was making fun of me, and I ran into Monsieur Amal's little yard all out of breath because he was running, because he was already late. So by the time he reached the schoolyard, he was out of breath. Now we'll go to page 40. Para 5. Usually at the beginning of school, there was a great uproar which could be heard in the street. Desks opening and closing, lessons repeated aloud in unison, and the teacher's stout ruler beating on the desk. So here we can see that Franz, as he reached school, he expected to hear what he usually heard on other school days. A lot of noise, students reading their lessons aloud, the desk being opened and closed, and the teacher's ruler beating on the desk. But let's see what happens in para 6. I had counted on all this noise to reach my bench unnoticed, but that day, as it happened, everything was quiet. Through the open window, I saw my comrades already in their places, and Monsieur Amal walking back and forth with the terrible iron ruler under his arm. I had to enter in the midst of that perfect silence filled with both shame and fear. So, what Franz had hoped for was that, oh, today will be the same as any other day. There will be a lot of noise, and even though I'm late, I will go in quietly and no one will notice me, especially Monsieur Amal, the teacher. But it did not happen. That day, everything was quiet. And through the window, Franz saw everybody seated in their places and Monsieur Amal walking back and forth with his ruler under his arm. But he's already there. He has to enter the classroom, and he entered very quietly, filled with shame because he was late and fear because he was afraid of the scolding that he would receive from his teacher. Para 7. But Monsieur Amal, who looked at me with no sign of anger, said very gently, "Go at once to your seat, my little Franz. We were going to begin without you." Again, Franz is surprised because, unlike other days where he would have been scolded very badly, on this day, Monsieur Amal did not show any sign of anger, but rather spoke to him very kindly. "Go to your seat, my little Franz. We were going to begin without you," as if they have been sitting there waiting for him, the latecomer. Why? Franz doesn't understand. Para 8. I stepped over to the bench and sat down at my desk. When I had partly recovered from my fright, I noticed that our teacher had on a handsome coat, his plaited ruff, and the black embroidered breeches which he wore on days of inspection or of distribution of prizes. Moreover, there was something extraordinary, something solemn about the whole class. So Franz enters the classroom, sits down at his desk, and after he had recovered from his fright, he noticed something else that was out of the ordinary. What was it? He noticed that his teacher, Monsieur Amal, had put on his special clothes, as it is being described here. And he would never wear these clothes unless it was prize distribution or there was an inspection. And he also felt, Franz also felt, there was something extraordinary about the whole class. But he doesn't know why yet. Page 41, para 9. But what surprised me most was at the back of the room, some men from the village sitting as silent as we were. Old Hauser, the ex-mayor, the ex-postman, and others besides. They all seemed depressed, and Hauser had brought an old spelling book with gnawed edges, which he held wide open on his knee. So, one thing after another is surprising Franz about his classroom. He noticed that in the back of the class, which usually used to be empty, it was filled with the older people from the village. So those names that were mentioned, Old Hauser, the ex-mayor, the ex-postman, and others. And they were not sitting there happily. They all seemed depressed. Depressed as in sad. And Hauser had even brought an old spelling book of which the edges, when you handle a book for a long time, it gets worn out at the edges. And he had this book open on his knee. So, Franz doesn't know what to think, seeing all these things happening. Para 10. While I was wondering at all this, Monsieur Amal said to us in the same gentle and serious voice with which he had welcomed me, "My children, this is the last time that I shall teach you. Orders have come from Berlin to teach nothing but German. in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. The new teacher arrives tomorrow. This is the last class in French. So I beg you to be very attentive. So finally in this para we can see and we can understand why things are so different on this day. Why? Because this was the last class that would ever be held in Franz school in French. And the new teacher who would be teaching German would come to school the next day. And that is why everyone, including the old people from the village, had also come to the school. Those few words overwhelmed me. This is what Franz feels. He got a shock. The villains! That was what they had posted at the mayor's office. So now he understands why so many people were standing in front of the notice board. Now he began to understand that it was because of this notice that French would no longer be taught in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. My last class in French. So this is the feeling of despair and sadness that Franz had when he heard this announcement from his teacher. So for today, till para 12, students, we will stop here. In the next class, we shall see how the day ends, how Monsieur Amal goes about his last class, and what else can we find out about how the people felt and how Franz, the main character, felt about this new situation. I would like you to go to the story yourself. In the next class, we shall complete it. So, para 12, page 41. Next, we will resume from para 13. Thank you.
Stay home, stay safe, do it for yourself, do it for your family, do it for India. Let's break the chain